This is the Picky Girl Travels the World podcast, and I am your host, Adelia Roshida of pickygirltravelstheworld.com. Just in case you're new here, this podcast is about and for Black women who want to live life on their own terms. For some women, that is exiting a bad marriage and moving to the other side of the world. But for others, that might mean quitting a toxic job. But whatever it is for you, I want this to be a place where you can explore what it is you really want your life to be. Which brings me to my guest for this episode, Miss Roshida Dow of Sheeta's on the Loose. Roshida is an attorney turned career coach and a fellow lover of all things Mexico City. As you listen to her uniquely compelling story, it is going to be so clear to you why I wanted her to be a guest here.
You are currently living in Florida. You went to law school in Virginia, but according to Facebook, your hometown is Riverside, California.
When people ask me where I'm from, I always just say it's a long story. My answer is it's a long story, but I grew up in California. In order of how this went, England, where I was born, Southern California, like in the Valley, Jamaica, Riverside, California for 10 years. So I was there from like 10 to 18. The Bay Area, Virginia, Charlottesville, Virginia, Columbus, Ohio, which is the longest place I've ever lived. So that was 10 years. And then back to the Bay Area, then around the world, then Mexico City, and now South Florida.
Wow. I don't think I knew that you were born in the UK. I knew that you had Jamaican roots, but I didn't know you were born in the UK. So go ahead.
My parents met. Both my parents are from the West Indies, and they met in England, and my sister and I were born there. But honestly, I've only been back once, and it was at the tail end of a 2.5 week work trip, and I was exhausted. But I had to add on some extra days in London because that's where I was from, and I was so excited. And I literally checked into my hotel room and did not leave the room again until 2 days later when I was heading to the airport. I was so tired, and it rained the entire time, and I was frustrated. And I was, after a long work trip, you're just kind of like, just get me home. That's where I was, and I was like, I can't. The city I was born in, I've never experienced as an adult, so it's really hard to talk about it because I moved when I was 2. Like, what is there to say? I don't remember it at all. My sister remembers it a lot. I don't remember it at all. And when I did have a chance to explore, I was like, nope, it's cold and wet outside. I'm staying in this hotel room.
So how do you label yourself?
So I typically give the short answer, but it doesn't lead to follow-up questions, which is simply Black. Like, no one in my family, in my immediate family, is born in America. So I struggle with African American. Like,
well, that's because African American is a stupid term, but we'll talk about that another time. So you are not American.
I'm not American.
Okay.
I have lived in America the longest out of any country I've lived in, but I've had an immigrant experience in America. Sometimes I feel like I don't have either, because I think we stereotype what an immigrant is in a lot of ways. Like, we expect them to have to sound like where they come from, and to in a lot of ways look like where they came from, instead of looking and sounding what we consider American in our minds. And so, because I've been here so long, I blend in better than most people expect immigrants to. And so when I tell people I was born in England and that none of my family's from here, people are often like, wait, what? And I remember someone told me, once, I mean, they didn't call me a liar, but they generally implied that I was not telling the truth. And I'm like, because that's a really like stupid thing to lie. Like, why would I? Okay. But you know, people are weird. Like I think a lot of times, especially when we're younger, people have a hard time of stretching beyond what they actually know. And so if you tell them a fact that doesn't align with their world experience, it's easier to sort of say, you must not be telling the truth, or your experience, or finding a way to invalidate your experience instead of allowing that moment for growth.
Was this person Black?
I remember it. I remember hearing it. I don't remember who I heard it from. And so I can't
curious,
tell you.
Because I feel like Black people, more than anybody else, very much get put into this box. And so being Black and being an immigrant, like, people in the US don't really know what to do with that, especially when you sound the way you do. It doesn't compute.
Right. But I think we have to take into account that we are all voluntary or involuntary immigrants. It just depends on, I mean, if you're not Native American. So it just depends on when your people got here. My people got here later than some. So there's nothing special about that experience. It's just, we, you know, in other countries, I am in Mexico, I am the immigrant. It's a different experience. In England, I also didn't feel at home. And so there's that aspect of homelessness is not the right word.
You don't belong.
Yes,
you don't belong.
There's an aspect of not belonging that I have felt for a long time. And I felt it the most, I will say, when I came back from Jamaica to go to, and I was 10. So I was in the 5th grade. The kids were not that, I came back with a full Jamaican accent. I'd been there for 2 years. Like, I sounded like all my family does. The kids were not that kind. Like, I was othered in a way that I wasn't used to. Like, before I moved to Jamaica, I went to a school, and I think my sister and I were the only Black kids there. And so we were othered, but it wasn't as direct. It wasn't as like I don't remember, I was younger, of course, but I don't remember the like, you're Black, you're different conversation. I just remember looking different than everyone. And that those things may have happened, and it may have been like, I don't know if parents, you know, did anything. I don't know if kids did anything. I don't remember that as a factor. But when I came back from Jamaica, it was very much you don't sound like us. You're different from us. And one thing that was really important, or beyond that, you don't sound like us, that didn't bother me as much as I didn't have the cultural references that everyone had. So there's that, like, the late 80s, I had a completely different experience than most Americans did in the late 80s, because I lived in a different country, didn't have regular access to radio, to US television, to any of that. And so people reference things, especially right when I'd gotten back, it was like, people would talk about TV shows, and I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. So I'm back in America, where I feel like I belong, because it's where I grew up. But I now have this accent, and I have very few points of reference that are familiar with my peers. And that was a distinct othering that I will never forget. Like that, I think that has helped form me in some ways, where it was like, not that they weren't kind, but they weren't shy about being like, you're very different.
It's interesting, and it's unsurprising that you have a sense of not necessarily fitting anywhere. Unlike you, I lived in the United States for the first 41 years of my life in the same state. And I do not feel as if I belong there. I find that interesting. Very much. When people talk about home, I'm kind of like, I don't really have one. I've sort of taken Mexico as my second home, but I very much, you know, when people live abroad, they talk about, oh, I'm going to go home to visit. I don't say that because I don't feel a connection, a very strong connection to the U.S. anymore. And it's primarily because my values align in a different way than what are very strong American values and things like that. Yeah, I'm kind of a person without a country sometimes, except when I go some places and it's like, I'm very American.
There are some countries and some people in those countries who will remind you frequently that you ain't from here. We are not your people. We see you and we other you, But then I was talking to someone about this the other day. There are a lot of countries, and I see this more with countries that have Black and Latino residents or large populations, where not only are they not othering you, but they're also not worried about you. Like no one, like they're not thinking about you. They're not worried about what you're doing on the street. Like when I moved to Mexico City, or when I spent like 5 weeks there, when I was thinking about moving there, so it was like a little pre-trip. I had a little medical emergency, went to the doctor. On the day I was supposed to check out of my Airbnb and into another one, left with the eye patch over my eye, like just taped up. So now I've got to move from one Airbnb to a new one with this eye patch. I find it. Now I've got to move to a new Airbnb, you got to find food, right? So I go to a restaurant and I'm in some local neighborhood, Valle. It's, I can't remember the name of it, but it's totally like all locals, no tourists. And I know this the minute I step foot in there, like, oh, there are no tourists around here. Like it's just me. Cool. I go to this restaurant and they are like, if you will not order your full meal in Spanish, we are not messing with you. Like there was no, like most places in Mexico City, I can kind of mime. I can, say like a few words, but they were like, no, like give it to us. But even though I'm walking through a very local neighborhood with this eye patch on, Black girl, drawing attention to myself because I've got this big piece of white cotton taped across my face. Like, no one bothers me. No one asks me any questions. There's no like, what are you doing here? There's no like, it's literally like, oh, she just moved into this rental. Like everyone knows where the Airbnbs are. She just moved in there.
And they're like,
whatever,
oh, okay.
Right? Oh, she's going to get food. Okay, like no one cares. Like you can literally, and even if they don't know what you're doing, they still don't care what you're doing because they have enough stuff to worry about.
Yeah.
Like,
No, I have noticed that as well. And I think that is one of the reasons I kind of prefer to be here is because, they kind of let you make it. Nobody's thinking about what you're doing.
Yes. And even if they're curious, because I have been in neighborhoods, or even when I've drawn attention, if people are like, who is she and what is she doing here? They're not going to ask you, right? Because that would be rude. They're not going to ask you that question. They're not going to try to figure out if you belong in the neighborhood. They might watch you for a second, but they're not going to turn and stare. They're not going to film you. They're going to mind their own business. And that is something I really appreciate. As someone like you who has made homes in different places and doesn't necessarily feel like they have a true home base, being able to go to countries where I might not look like everybody else, but nobody cares. Like that, I really value that. Like I know I am an other, but you're not going out of your way
to make you
feel bad and to make me feel like other. And I feel like I wish America was more like that, where like our immigrants could just be people minding their own business.
And then, no, the lie we tell ourselves is that we are a melting pot. And it's BS because we're not a melting pot. It's more of a tossed salad because when you're somebody different, you are very distinct until you agree to assimilate.
Yes.
Until you agree to assimilate, you are very much othered and reminded of your otherness.
Yes. No one in Mexico has ever said, it's Mexico, speak Spanish. Like they're just like, are we doing business? Yes or no?
Yeah. Like talk to me when you can get it together. Come back and talk to me.
I'm here for you, right? Like I will be patient. Use your little translator. Figure out what you want to say. I'll be here and I will help you. But no, you know what I mean? Like there's no. And then there are the people in line behind me who are like, help you, people who can bridge that gap, will bridge that gap in ways that I don't see happening in America. And that, you know, makes me more hopeful for my experiences in other countries than it does for my experience in America. Like, I have one story I want to tell. And it was, I got out of the airport in Bogota, and there was a shuttle. My airport hotel had a shuttle, but apparently the shuttle was supposed to run like every 30 minutes or so. I waited like an hour and never saw the shuttle, and or maybe less by the time this whole story started. So I'm standing there, and airport police walks over, and he's like trying to ask me like, what are you doing? Like, because I'm just standing here. And I am trying to explain to him this is years ago, so my Spanish is even worse than it was now. I'm trying to explain to him that I'm trying to get to my hotel and no one's shown up, whatever. I think he gets the gist. He leaves his post, and he's one of those people that's telling the cars to move, like we have in American airports, like, you gotta move, you gotta move. He leaves his post, goes downstairs to another part of the airport, comes back with a tour guide who speaks English to help me figure out how to get to my hotel. The tour guide calls my hotel and was like, come get her. And then the hotel bus shows up. I cannot imagine that happening in the US. There's no situation, like the tour guide was like, okay, I need to get my people on this bus, but once I do, I'm gonna come back and I'm gonna call your hotel. I cannot imagine that whole situation of the police officer walking, instead of being like, you gotta go, the police officer was like, how can I help you? You know what I mean? Like in Spanish, me in English, we're working this through. Another time in Bogota, like a lot of Black Americans, I'm hesitant to deal with the police. So I'm waiting for a tour to start, cannot find the place, the statue. It's exactly, you know, in a lot of these countries, there's 1,000 statues. So I cannot find the statue in the square where this tour is supposed to start. And so I asked this police officer, and he's like, girl, we're not speaking the same language. So he's like, come with me. There's this little police shack, looks like a little, like maybe like a lifeguard shack, but on the ground, it's small, you know. He's like, come on in. And I'm hesitant, like there are like 3 officers in there, like, I don't really want to walk it. Right? Like, I don't really want to walk in here. But he comes over, he gets on his laptop and starts typing out, like, and goes to like a translation site and starts translating what I need. And those are not experiences I see immigrants in America having.
No, they don't. Because you talked before about you are an immigrant, but of course you speak English. So yes, your experience is different. But no, that is not the experience that immigrants have there. And that has been something that I have been aware of and really weighs on me, because there are so many times when I find myself as an immigrant and people go out of their way to help. Mm-hmm. And it's not because, I know somebody might hear this and think, oh, well, it's because you're an American and they think you have a lot of money. Until I open my mouth, people don't assume American, because people assume Americans are white. Mm-hmm. So, you know, just moving into the apartment this week, how many times the security guard or somebody saw me lugging these 3 50-pound bags around and was just like, where are you going? And they just picked up the bag and was like, here, let me take that for you. It really distresses me that is not the experience people from the US, not from the US, have when they visit. Mm-hmm. And it also distresses me that most people would not be bothered by that.
I always try to show kindness when people are out of their element. And I think that's something that's been ingrained with me the more I travel. Like, I'll be in an airport trying to help someone in Spanish, and I'm like, we're in Tokyo, and I don't know that I can help you because I don't have any information about this place, but you need someone who understands your language, and I got you a little bit, so let me see if I can help you just a little bit further than what, you know what I mean? A little further along. That amount of kindness really, really warms you to a location in a way that I think people who move here are often surprised by not getting the welcome that they would give people at home, at wherever their home is.
Yes.
So, I don't want this to be a bashing America session.
No, but the thing is, like, I was going to say, I didn't assume that you were American because I knew you were Jamaican, but I've never really thought of you as an immigrant.
Mm-hmm.
But your experience is valid, and I'm sure there are plenty of other Black immigrants who are looking for someone to put a voice to that experience. So no, this is not about bashing the United States, but I'm very much about calling a spade a spade.
And yes, it is a spade.
Yeah.
And it's America. Our culture in America really tries to put people in boxes really hard. Biden's comment the other day about like African Americans having like
not being as diverse.
Yes, not being as diverse. And I, as Latinos, really, because Latinos are from so many other places, and I'm like, it's apples and oranges. Like you're willing to acknowledge that there is an immigrant experience for Latinos, but not for Black people in the country. Like you have said African Americans, which is a subset, and it's the only subset you've recognized, whereas you've expanded the Latino conversation to like everyone here, And so we see it in the little ways that there's, especially as a Black woman in America, I'm put into a box and I am what other people perceive me to be. And you can stay in America and fight to get your way out of the box, or you can go somewhere else where like that box doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And people will always have stereotypes about you. People will always think different things. People assume I'm from a lot of different places when I travel. The last one I really remember was like Cuba, and I'm like, interesting, but no, but like you said, it was before I spoke. People don't typically guess America. There's that freedom that comes from like, people might in their mind put you in a box, but they are not trying to use societal forces to keep you in that box.
They're not going to use the box against you. The box is more about, I need to categorize this person.
Yes.
Not
and we all do it.
them. Yes.
We all quickly categorize people.
And that's a useful thing to do, but it's another thing to try and define people. Your early life wasn't typical. Because I know just a little bit about your time living in Jamaica. You mentioned about like not having access to like American pop culture and that kind of thing. How do you think your experiences growing up played a role into who you are now or who you became?
I hate that travel has sort of become a personality trait for a lot of people, in that like it's the number one thing they talk about. But this, we're talking about travel. And so I'll start with this. Being a traveler was never like an option, like never like a question. Like my immediate cousins and aunts and uncles all lived on different islands in the West Indies, in the Caribbean. So like if I wanted to see people I was related to, I had to travel, or they were in Florida or New York. As an immigrant, I'm not tied to this land because this land was never mine. There's that aspect that like packing a bag and saying I'm going to travel the world for a year. I've realized after talking to a lot of people, that decision probably came easier to me than it did to other people, because traveling is just something my family does, and not for vacations really, but just
but
for like
the premise of leaving what you know to go somewhere else, that wasn't as big of a jump because that was already a part of your existence.
And like when I lived in Jamaica, we didn't have running water inside. We did not have toilet. Like we had an outhouse outside. We had a shower outside, cold water shower outside. We didn't have consistent electricity. Like I can live anywhere. Now I will not live like that again. Let me tell you. Let me tell you, that was not a choice I made. I will not do it again. They got like an indoor plumbing like right after I left. And I was like, really? Really, Grandma? Like, that's what we're doing? But it also taught me, I think, a lot about tourism. Like, Jamaica has always been such like a vacation place. But if you leave your resort, if you go inland, if you go to a different parish, like when I lived in Jamaica, it was a third world country. And my last time being in Jamaica, I was like, I still see like the signs. And third world countries probably a little has that negative connotation. I hate to talk about it like that, but we did not have indoor plumbing. We did not have electricity. I shat outside an outhouse. Like, it is what it is. Like, and you know, the homelessness was crazy because there were no support services. This is in the 80s. I don't know what the support services are like now. So Jamaicans, please, I don't need any. If you'd like to educate me, I would love it. If you're coming at my neck, I don't need it. Love you, cousins, you know. But there's that element of like, I have done without. I am okay sleeping for one night at a place that has shoddy electricity, and tomorrow I will find a different Airbnb because I have spent years at a place that had, you know what I mean, inconsistent electricity. Yeah. So I feel like when I'm traveling and when I'm looking for places to stay, I'm just kind of like, there's a little bit of like, what's the worst that can happen? Now, I'm careful so the worst does not happen, but it's also like, these places will not be that bad. They will not be as bad as the years I spent, you know, showering outside.
And you went from that to cold showers and an outhouse, and you became a lawyer.
Yeah. There was a lot of hard work in between. But
why'd you become a lawyer?
I wanted to be a doctor. I always wanted to be a psychiatrist. I went to school. I was pre-med. I was in organic chemistry. And I was sitting there, and I was in lab one day, and my lab partners were not doing the work. We were graded on a curve, so they were figuring out how many people they had to do better than to get the grade they wanted, which I guess was an A. So like, instead of actually doing the work we needed to do in the lab, they were like doing math to determine what
they were playing school, and you wanted to get an education.
And I realized, and that was like the moment where it hit me, but I realized that these were not the people I wanted to spend the next however many years of my life with. I didn't want to spend my life with these people. Like, this just does not suit my personality at all. I don't want to have to be competitive. I want to learn, like, why aren't we actually like just doing what we have to do?
That's interesting that you say that, because I often think of lawyers as being hyper competitive.
So it's funny. So I'll get there in a second. So I needed to change my major. I think that was my sophomore year. And I was like, what can I do that will get me graduating in 4 years? Because I'm not stretching this shit out. Like, I'm done. Like, I'm like a sophomore and I'm already over it. Like, how could I get through this? I'd taken a couple of rhetoric classes. I switched my major to rhetoric, graduated. Everyone was like, what are you going to do? And I was like, oh, man, I don't know. Took 2 years doing absolutely the least, like working part-time at a real estate office, like just enough to pay the bills. And then I realized I could not afford myself. So I started studying for the bar. I will say this. So when I was in Jamaica, it was because my mom was in law school and she was studying for the bar, and my parents didn't feel like they could properly raise us while she was working full-time and going to law school, and my dad was working. And so we went to live with her parents in Jamaica. And so I've worked in her law office forever, but I always tell people, like, I was not going to be a lawyer. I was not going to be a lawyer. I was not going to be a lawyer. But when it came to, like, I need to do something else, and it wasn't med school, and it wasn't being a part-time receptionist for the rest of my life, because, like I said, I was like, I like to eat good, and it's not happening like this. Like people don't, like, that's, I think, one of the biggest, total segue, but I think that's one of the biggest transitions from, like, when you start to take care of yourself, like no one explains how expensive it is to live to live your life. Like no matter what level of living you want, it is generally a lot more expensive than you expect it to be. And so I was like, okay, let me take the LSAT and see how I did. And I did really, really well. So I was like, okay, law school. And that's how I became a lawyer. I was like, I need to do a job where I'll be able to afford my expensive taste. And that was it. But I went to a law school I went to UVA. It was more collaborative and competitive, which is strange for a law school. It was not competitive. People still want to do really well, but like in some law schools, you hear people like hiding books or doing things. And we didn't have time for that. My work as a lawyer, I have had opposing counsel on a lot of deals. The work that I did for the longest part of my career, it always worked better if we were collaborating than competing. What happened more often is that I formed relationships with lawyers on the other side of the table, and we worked really well together. Really well, where I could be like, okay, I trust that what you're telling me is the truth. Like you're telling me that like X, Y, and Z needs to happen differently than usual because of A, B, and C are different here. And I'm gonna tell my team, and I'm gonna tell them like, we don't have any reason to disbelieve this because we've worked on so many deals together, and you've been so forthright with me on so many deals that like we're good. As opposed to like we're sitting on opposite sides of the table trying to like get at each other. I don't have.
That's actually refreshing to hear. It's surprising and refreshing. So
I think that's because most of the time when you see lawyers in pop culture, they're like in court or they're backbiting or trying to like get over on somebody. Mama don't have the energy for all that. Like I'm just like, I'm going to do this deal and then I'm going to go home, put my feet up. Like I don't take work home with me. I rarely took work home with me, and I rarely got stressed about stuff because a lot of the way I was able to release the pressure from myself when I was working, and in the same breath, a lot of the way that I realized my work was insignificant in the larger sense is that my whole career, my job, when it boils down to it, has been to make rich people richer. Like I'm not Karen Cantor. You ain't got to call me on the weekend. Like, what is this 5 a.m. email? Like what are we? Literally, no one is going to die about this. Like, it's money. We're lending it to you so you can pay us the money back with interest that is going to go to the owners of this company. I'm going to get a tiny, tiny %, but I'm really just making rich white people richer. That's not how I wanted to spend my life. Like, it's a job. There were jobs that paid well, but like, I wasn't put on earth for this.
Okay. And so it's interesting you say that. Okay. So there is this thought, there is this moment where you're like, I'm out here making rich white folks richer. This is not like what I was put here to do. At what point are you having these thoughts? Are we talking a year in? We're talking 5 years in?
A year in, I was so broken and bruised from my first legal job that I couldn't think of anything. My first job was about 2 years long, and it was a year and a half. It was terrible. It was in all senses of the word abusive. Like, some of the female partners at the law firm would try, like I wouldn't say anything to them, and they would, if they had enough power and clout, would go behind the scenes to try to change something in my situation to make it better. Like, oh, they put you in his suite, so your office is right next to him. No, that's not healthy. We need to move you out of here. Without me saying anything, they'd be like, no, her office needs to move. Because that's how bad the situation was. Like, they knew the people I was working with were that terrible that like you can't get all your work for him, have your office next to him. Like, that was just, it was too much. And I was at a law firm, and a lot of lawyers at law firms are treated really crappily when they start. And so they pass down that behavior. And they pass down that behavior within the scope of like patriarchy and racism. And so like, yes, you're being shitty to me, and you're being shitty to everyone, but there's no chance you're being shitty to me and the white guy in the same way. And they weren't. Like at one point I got dinged for taking initiative on one of my deals, a deal that I owned because a partner gave it to me. That partner had left. I had a review and they were like, you took initiative. And I'm like, but everything went perfectly. And I didn't take initiative. I didn't call the partner who was on vacation in Hawaii about the deal, but I talked to the partner who was right here in the office about the deal. So I wasn't doing things I wasn't closing this deal without
some kind of oversight.
Without guidance. I just didn't get guidance from the guy who told me he was going on vacation and wouldn't really be available. But he got back and got in his feelings because I got the job done without him. And next thing you know, it's affecting my pay for the next year because I took initiative. And it's like, y'all are really writing, you guys really wrote down, not even a lot. Like I took initiative to get the deal done is a reason to ding me. Have y'all ever done that to a white boy? That was a moment where I was like,
not.
Because I'd been getting, in some ways, abused by people in my department. Hearing this from people outside of a department who were in charge of the reviews, and hearing this from a woman being like, this is the reason, this is what you did wrong, like you took initiative. Hearing like a third party say this, that's when I knew like there's no hope for me at that job. Like, oh, y'all really let this white man walk in here and say, I closed this huge deal without him. And so I have to be punished for that. Even though nothing went wrong, the client loves me. They're my client and they're still my client. Like, even though all of that happened, you still have to find a way to ding me for not coming to you and kissing. And if I called you, you would have said I bothered you when I was on vacation. I guarantee that.
Of course.
If I called you in Hawaii, I would have gotten dinged for not being able to close the deal without your support.
Yeah, like you can't even work independently. Oh,
right.
No, that's totally BS. And you and I both know that a white guy in a similar situation would not have been dinged for that. Now,
and so, yeah, I was just like, so this isn't going to work. Economy crashed. They laid off 20% of their associates, including me. I was doing real estate financing. So 2009, no one was hiring lawyers to do real estate financing because no one was financing real estate anymore. And I ended up getting hired for a temp job at BMW. And just a totally long story, and you can edit all of this out because nobody cares. But at BMW, when I got there, they were like, oh, you really know how to finance real estate. Like, oh, you really know how to do commercial real estate. Oh, you know how to do it. And I'd spent the last year and a half at the law firm with them telling me I didn't know how to do anything. I didn't know how to do anything. I didn't know how to do anything. And so to come to a new situation where people are like, oh, you're an expert in this. And I was like, I know things. Or I would like they would ask me a question, I'd be able to answer it. And it took me a while to stop doubting myself because I had been beaten down so long with you're incapable, you don't know how to do anything, you can't do anything right, in that abusive work relationship, that when I got to a better one, I still carried that trauma with me. And it took me a while to be like, oh, I know my shit. I know my shit better than anybody in this room. Like, I am the expert.
What you just said, I think that's important to stop and talk about the idea, because it happens in work relationships, it happens in life in other ways where we internalize the bullshit that people feed us and doubt our own ability to do whatever the thing is that we can do, we know we want to do. And that I don't know, when you said that like so resonated with me, because that's part of, all the bullshit I put up with in the first half of my life.
Mm-hmm. And for me, it was kind of like, I only have these, I don't know, maybe 8 white men in my department. When I left my department, it was all white men. When I started, there were like, I think 5 women. And when I left, I was the last one, of course. So I have you 8 white men to teach me everything I know, and you're the only ones who judge my work. And so when you consistently tell me I'm not doing things right, or like I get dinged for taking initiative, it scares me into like, I feel like I have to come to you with every question now, because what's my next review going to say? Like what, you know? And so I lived in that without even realizing it. I lived in that moment. I knew I hated my job, but I didn't realize how much they made me think I didn't know anything until I got out of there. And I was like, I got to a situation where I could show that I knew things. And it wasn't like, I am here, I know things. It was like people would ask me a question. I'm like, oh, no, that's not how you, like, this is how you do that. And they would be so grateful because no one ever told them how to do that thing before. And so they started looking at me, the expert, and I started to embody that role of like, how'd I go from like rank amateur to expert so quickly? Oh, I switched situations. Like it literally was that simple, just switching situations. And I am now like the master of this domain. And I spent years like that until my boss switched my role into a new role where I knew nothing. And my clients knew more than I did. And then it was like, you need to learn this shit real quick. And I did. And then I got to like an expert role again. And then my next role after that was in the same topic, but my clients knew nothing and I knew I was the expert. And so a little bit of that is like, don't be afraid to switch your area of expertise. Like if you're really good at one thing, don't be afraid to leave that behind because you might be really good in everything too. But there's also the message of, number one, these jobs don't love you. They don't care about you. And don't let a job tell you you're bad at something because they're not doing that for you. They're not like when they told me when they gave me bad reviews, it wasn't because I was a bad worker. It was because they were trying to keep me in my place.
Yeah, it wasn't about making you better at the job. Like
No.
telling you you're doing this wrong and here's the right way to do it. No, you said it exactly. It was about keeping you in your place, making sure you understood where your role was.
Yeah, I was like, it isn't sustainable for your main goal with me is that I don't get better than you, or I don't get recognition, or I don't like.
But that's
just not
so common. And
yes.
I hope that anybody listening to this, if they can see some element in some part of their life, because it's not just a work thing. Very much there are relationships we have with people. And it's like, yeah, we can be cool as long as you're not more successful than me, or you're not more this than me. And that the whole dynamic in that relationship can very much be about keeping you in this place, even though that's not where you're supposed to be.
Right.
Now, so you realized with that first abusive job that like, this is not my life's work, is about helping rich white folks stay rich. And you transitioned into some other roles. Some were better, some had their own issues. But ultimately, you ended up taking a career break.
Yes.
Was that something that was always in the back of your head, like one day I'm going to quit my job and travel the world? Or was it something that kind of evolved differently somehow?
So I've always been fascinated by people who can like travel for months at a time. And I always wondered like how they did it. Like, what do you mean you just quit and you're traveling? But it was always like 20 something white girls that I would see doing it. And I'm like, okay, you work as a barista for 6 months and then you travel to foreign country like for 6 months. Like, how does that work? And then I realized that I made assumptions that parents are paying for things or whatever. Looking back now, I realized that was none of my business. Like, how they pay for that? Like, that's not your business. What we should be asking is like, can I manifest this life for myself? Like, what can I do in my situation to do it? And I always felt like my biggest fear was that I would quit. I do very specialized work in the legal field. And so I was scared, but I would quit and I would come back and there wouldn't be a job that I wanted. Because I'm not just going to take any job. It has to be a job that I wanted. And so it sounded nice, but it didn't really seem practical. It also seemed like the kind of thing that was for less responsible people. Like, I own a house. Like, you don't just get up and leave. Like, I have student loans. You don't just get up and leave. Eventually, I paid off my mortgage. Eventually, I paid off my student loans. But I will say that the thing that got me getting to a career break was a 10-year journey I didn't know I was on. So I got laid off, I mentioned earlier, in 2009. And I sat in my dark living room applying for jobs for like 6 months. And I'm not going to say I was depressed, but I'm not going to say I wasn't. Like, it was a rough time. Like, there was so much, like, every day not knowing if you were going to get a job, like, how you're going to pay your bills, all of that stuff was really rough. And they laid us off with like 2 weeks notice and no severance. So it was really not a great situation. So it was kind of like, surprise, you're here. So that was the point where I was like, okay, get your money together. Like, I started paying down debt. When I got the new job, or should I say, when I was without a job, I really cut down my expenses. And when I got a new job, I didn't let my expenses go up. Like, they stayed the same. I got a new job. I was getting paid more than I was at the law firm. So I had more money than ever before, and my expenses were lower than they'd ever been before. And so I was doing a really good job of paying down debts. And it was really important to me because I personally do not like the feeling of debt. And I know some people are more comfortable with it than others, but I knew that to feel really free, I didn't want to have to owe anybody a certain amount of money every month. And so that was what I focused on. I went on a career break after the company I was working for went out of business. And they gave me 6 months notice that they were going out of business. I knew well before they announced it, though, that they were going out of business, because I was like, this business model does not seem sustainable. I ended up actually staying for 7 months because they asked me to stay on for another month. So I was one of the last 2 employees at the company. That is what I used to give me the confidence to take the career break. The money from that. I will say, what I know now is that my 12-month sabbatical could have been a lot cheaper if I'd used other tools, if I had more information that I didn't have at the time. And so the money I thought I needed wasn't really the money I needed. I was always afraid to do it because like what happens when you run out of money? Typically you go home or you go somewhere you can afford if you run out of money. People always think this is, a super expensive experience, and it doesn't have to be. One of the reasons I took a career break instead of getting another job was everything aligned in that moment and said it was time for me to go. And I think a lot of times we are so stuck on the path, whether that is like the hamster wheel in the cage or the treadmill or however you define it. We are so stuck on the path to success to success in America that we have been like put on at a young age that we don't see that there are other options for us. And for me, it was like the universe said, but you're going to see these other options. You cannot miss this sign. And if you do, you're a dummy. So my job was up April 27th. I was going on vacation on May 1st. So April 27th, May 1st. So it was like a Friday to a Monday, I think, or something like that, or a Tuesday. I was going to China for like 3 weeks. And then my lease was up May 8th. And so I had to figure out whether I was going to renew my lease, and they were increasing my rent, and it was getting close to $3,000 a month for a 1-bedroom. When I was employed, I was like, I don't like these numbers, but you'll pay them. I'm gonna deal with it. Now that I don't have a job, do I want to sign a lease for a year to pay this number on the strength that I might get a job? And I hate moving. So if I'm going to move to someplace smaller that I might not like as much as this place, what if I move my stuff into storage instead and went to travel the world? So it was like, I was applying for jobs. I didn't like the jobs I was applying for. I went to interviews. I did not like the jobs at the interviews. And so it was like, I can get a job I don't like and continue to live in this apartment that I like enough, or I can see what else is out there. And like I said to you earlier, as an immigrant, the idea of leaving everything behind for something new is kind of like in my genes. Like my family had never been to California. My parents never been to California before they moved there. They were just like, we hear it's nice and sunny, so like, let's go. And they moved from England. Like they'd never lived anywhere in America before. I was kind of like, I've always wanted to do this. I'm not in a relationship. I don't have kids. Someone has, without me asking, has volunteered to take my dog. I don't have a job. I don't have a lease to get out of. Like, if now isn't the time, what is the time?
Oh yeah, the universe was talking to you.
Right.
You just had to listen. But I do wonder if the hesitation because of the need to kind of stay on the treadmill, I wonder if that's more of a product of being and living in the United States and in that culture. Yeah, I think maybe had you been living elsewhere, that feeling like if I don't, I lose my place.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? I think you might have felt less of that, but that's a big part of American culture, that if I do this thing, if I pursue this thing that I am interested in, I will not be able to get back to this level.
Yes. And also, I think that in a lot of ways, our culture, and it's not solely us, but it's definitely here, we equate success with happiness, even when we see it's not true. Like the culture, like if you get success, you will be happy. Even when we see a lot of unhappy, successful people,
the vast
and even
majority
when you get to the level of success that you
happy.
think is going to make you happy, if you're still not happy, it doesn't mean you need, we don't see it as a sign that success doesn't mean happiness. We see it as a sign that you need more success.
Yes. Yep.
And it's kind of like I learned along the way that there's no top to that. Like if you think money is going to make you happy, there's never going to be an amount of money that is like, okay, I've made this money, I'm happy now, I'm done. I have this money in my bank account, I can stop working for a year, because you've equated money, making, having money with happiness. And so you have to keep that engine running to keep this, what you think is happiness. A lot of times we're not happy, we're just achieving. And so really being able to say like, yes, it looks good from the outside. Yes, I'm a lawyer. Yay. But like, what does that mean in the long run? Having a therapist who could walk through that with me and could catch me when I was bullshitting was really, really important to me. And honestly, without her, I wouldn't have gone, because like one week I went in there and I was like, I did the math, I could make this work, blah, blah, blah. But next week I was like, what if I just get a job and stay here for a year and say, because it was literally like not more than 6 weeks between the time, I think it's closer to a month between the time I thought about it and the time I actually left. I thought about it like, I want to say end of March, beginning of April, and then I left in the beginning of May. But yeah, in that moment, it was kind of like, she hit me like, if you don't go now, you're never going to go. Like you're lying to yourself if you think that you're not going to go now, but you're going to go later. Like that's not going to happen. She's like, everything has lined up so perfectly that like, this is your opportunity. If you're choosing not to take it, just acknowledge that like you're giving this up.
Acknowledge that you are walking away from that.
Right. And so I like, people put some careers on pedestals, like lawyers and doctors, without recognizing that like, yes, it comes with some esteem. It might also come with some shitty treatment, like I mentioned at my first job. It comes with for a lot of us, a nice paycheck, but like, what are you giving up? At my last job, most of my clients were horrible people. They tried, I would say, to not be horrible, but like the overarching attitude at the employer led to like horrible interaction.
You just said it right there. Like, yes, you get the big paycheck, but what are you giving up? Something that I have learned is that there is a cost for everything.
Mm-hmm.
Either you pay it or the person on the other end pays it, but somewhere along the line, there is a cost. And you really have to ask yourself, is this benefit that I'm receiving worth the cost that I am paying, or that I'm causing other people, or that this is causing other people to pay?
I come back to a lot, like how can I be a responsible member of society and still be happy? And sometimes that, for a lot of us, that's going to mean you have to make your own happiness and you have to live by your own terms. Because yes, I'm a lawyer, and yes, we need more Black lawyers, and yes, we need more Black female lawyers, but I can't sacrifice myself on the altar of community. And the reason I say it's not because I don't want to support my community, it's because the only reason I have to sacrifice myself on the altar is because of the mistreatment from people outside of my community. So I want to support my community in the best way I know how, but I'm not going to let people outside of my community treat me like shit in order to support my community. Like, I need to find other ways to support my community.
But hasn't that been the plight of the Black woman? We're always supposed to sacrifice ourselves on the altar of community for the sake of everybody else. And I was about to say, if there's one thing that this podcast and this movement is about, is that no, we don't do that anymore. We don't do that. No. You did not, your career break is over, right? But you didn't go back to work.
No, I didn't go back to work because honestly, I can't imagine working for anybody else. Like, after taking a year off to live life the way I want to, I legit can't imagine how I would respond to a boss who tried to check me for being 5 minutes late. Like, I just don't have it in me anymore. I know the answer to that is to not be late, but y'all know life happens. So it's the idea that like the things that my old bosses would get snippy about, I can't even imagine like having to break in a new boss and let them understand what I will and will not deal with. I'm not here for it. And like, I feel like that's a big part of working. It's like, you have to train your bosses to let them know, like, yes, this is okay. No, this is not okay. So let's cut the bullshit. And like, if we can't find mutual grounds, it's not going to work. But like, if we're attempting to find mutual grounds, this is how I want you to treat me. And that I've always kind of had, since I left the first job, I've always kind of had that thing going with me into new jobs. It's like, okay, I see what the rules are, but most of the rules apply to me. So I'm going to have to teach you slowly. I'm going to have to manage up and show you my rules about what we will and will not do. Thank you.
I love that.
So yeah, so the career break turned into I'm retired. And I say I'm retired. I don't really know if I'm retired. Like, I still work on projects. I still work on things that I'm passionate about. I still work on ways that I can support my community.
You joke about you kind of ended up retiring on accident.
Yeah. Because like, I don't want to go back to work, and financially I don't need to go back to work, which feels like a really strange thing to say because I think that's a very un-American thing as well.
I would argue that the American thing is that eventually I want to stop working. But I would think the West Indian thing is, well, of course you have a job. You should have multiple jobs.
So I got a call from a recruiter the other day. My mom was like, well, are you going to call them back? What's going on? And I'm like, I don't work. I don't want to work. She's like, but it might be, you might be able to work remotely. And I'm like, working remotely is still working. Maybe you won't ever have to go into the office. And I'm like, yes, but they will still expect me to produce. I do not dream of labor.
You've achieved financial independence.
Yes.
Okay. And, are you comfortable saying how you did that?
The how is the 10 years of cutting costs, of like being laser focused on paying off my debt. And some of it is honestly accidental. Like, I've been laid off before and gotten no severance. I got laid off this time and got double pay for 7 months. Like, who would, you know what I mean? Like, that is clearly not something I expected, but it's something that really helped out. I had a paid off house out before I knew I was leaving Ohio. I bought a second house to flip, and they both sold in the same week, maybe like a day apart.
Oh, wow.
I got the money in my bank account, and I was like, this is not even a down payment in the Bay Area. So like, I guess I got to hold on to this cash, right? Like, I guess I got to hold on to it until I can afford a down payment. And so that was money that was sitting in mutual funds. And then when I decided to go, I was like, I guess that's not house money anymore. I guess that's like travel money. These are things that like I said, like my goal was to live in the Bay Area. My goal was to buy a house there. If that had happened, I would have a huge mortgage and I wouldn't be financially independent. And so it's just like the way things happen.
Isn't that, I don't know, that's so, I don't know the word I'm looking for, but on the one hand, you could have made a choice that would have led you down a path to home ownership where you would have had to continue to work a certain kind of job to be able to afford that lifestyle. You would have had this huge mortgage, you know, all the things that went with that, versus this other path where you were able to quit working, travel the world, and not work again. And you know, like one of those is considered to be more on par and a part of the American dream. And it's not the one that ended up with you not working and traveling the world. Right. I don't know if the word there is irony. I don't know, but the dichotomy there definitely stands out to me. Well, and you said that, you know, you still work on other projects. And I know that one of the things you do, you are now a career break coach.
Yes.
What is that? What do you do?
Okay. So that is my way. I said before that like I want to support my community the best way I can. And one of the best ways I can is to share my story and help other women who think they cannot get out of America. They cannot get off that hamster wheel, off that treadmill. And help them find solutions to cross the bridges between all of the I want to, but. I'm the person that comes to you and says, let's talk about your buts. You want to travel the world for a year. It's your dream. But let's go through all the buts and see how we can no longer make them a factor. Like, you think it's going to be super expensive. Okay, let's work on a budget. You think that you can't leave this job because you never get another one. Do you love this job? Because like, why, unless you love this job and it is your dream, and let me tell you, mama don't dream of labor, so that would not be the case for me. But unless this is like the best situation you've ever had, you love it, and that's, in that case, you're not talking to me about quitting that job. Because most people who are talking about quitting their jobs are unhappy because so much of the American workforce is unhappy. So if you come to me and you're unhappy, girl, you're going to quit your job. Like that is my specialty. I will talk to you. We will figure out how to get you to quit that unhappy job. And it happens all the time. It happens more frequently now. People are quitting just to stay at home. And it may not be forever. It may be just until for 6 months. I had a client earlier this year who was like, I want to spend more time with my son. And another part of that conversation, she realized that she didn't like who work was making her be with her son. Like she was always in a rush. She was always stressed and she wanted more like happy time with him. So she quit her job to spend like, I don't know, 5-6 months at home with him.
Well, because I was
and she
ask,
believes that she can get another job.
Ask if does a career break have to equate travel?
No. Because I talk about travel a lot, I end up getting a lot of clients who do want to travel. And I will say that sometimes people think that because COVID is happening and we are in a global pandemic, they cannot travel. But I planned my career break not very well. I was like, in fact, I intentionally unplanned. I was like, I'm not planning anything. I'm just going to go where the wind takes me. And that's one of the ways my break was more expensive than it needed to be, because I was like, I'm going to go here for a week, there for a week, wherever I feel like next. What I'm telling people, what I'm helping women with now is I'm helping them figure out, like, how could you spend the next 6 months or the next year planning your exit, planning whether that's becoming an expat in another country or taking a career break. How can you spend this time that we are in this lockdown and with this uncertainty? How can you add more certainty to your future plan? So is that like figuring out how much money you're going to need to travel when things open up? Is that starting to save? Is that realizing that you don't need to save because you have enough money? Or is it realizing that you want to get a side gig right now so you can put extra money away so that you can think about never going back to work. Like, let's talk about where you are now and how we transition you to 6 months, a year and a half ahead. And maybe I have clients who want to take a road trip around the country in a year. And it sounds like that's not a lot of things to plan in a year, but like, we're talking about like quitting her job. Is that in a car? Is it hotels along the way? Is it an RV? Like, what does that look like? And how much of it can you plan ahead now? Because the more you plan ahead, the cheaper it's going to be, and the better choices you're going to make. Now, I don't recommend planning everything out because plans change. And when your plans change, when you're traveling, that's when things get more expensive because you've sometimes wasted some money. But like, I really try to get them into the mindset of like, you have options. And sometimes people come to me and a lot of times people don't see the options available to them.
It's almost like you're a travel therapist.
Almost. You know, the part where I definitely see that is sometimes my clients just want permission. They just want someone to tell them they are not crazy, they can go. And you're not crazy, you can go. And like, people aren't going to judge you for giving up what you have to go. And if they do, they're probably not your people. Like, you don't owe it to anyone to be unhappy to make their life easier. Like, you don't have to trade your happiness for anyone else's pleasure or comfort. If traveling the world is what you want to do, and it means you have to leave, I don't know, your college-age kids to fend for themselves for a year, they will be okay, and they are not thinking about you. And if traveling the world is what you want to do, and you've got to take your school-age kids out of school to do it, they will probably be really happy at the end of the adventure. And if the adventure never ends, probably better for them. Like, a lot of people will say like, oh, I'm worried about my parents. Valid. Like, my dad passed away like 5 weeks into my career. No, a couple months into my career break. He passed away. I came back for the funeral and then I went to Cuba. Like, I can grieve in Cuba. Like, I don't know. Like, it's fine. You know, my mom is getting older. That's one of the reasons, after being I spent a big portion of my career break in Asia. One of the reasons I moved to Mexico City was that I could be closer to her because it was like a 2-hour flight, direct flight. And so there are choices you can make that will make this easier for other people, but that is not your responsibility. Like, you are not beholden to anyone else but yourself. But as Black women, we put ourselves so low.
And we're responsible for everybody's happiness except ours.
Mm-hmm. And like, freeing yourself from that mindset is the best thing you can do for yourself. And so sometimes when I talk to women, it's literally just, can I do this? And the answer is yeah. Like, I'll talk to them and I'm like, okay, you have the money. You want to quit your job. You want to travel. What are we talking about? Like, sometimes I really have to be like, so why are you here? Like, you paid for a session. Happy to talk to you. But like, what are you? Oh, you just want someone to tell you that you're not crazy. You're not crazy, girl. If you're thinking about this, you are not crazy.
So I guess this is where Exodus comes in.
This is where Exodus Summit comes in. So you already know, but for anyone who doesn't know, Exodus Summit, www.exodussummit.com, is a week-long gathering, virtual summit that Stephanie Perry, known online as Vicarious, and I are putting together to help Black women explore their options. So we're putting together experts in a lot of different travel-related spaces to come together so you can hear from other Black women about their experiences doing the thing you want to do. So if you want to travel the world with your children, we've got someone who'll talk about that. If you want to know how to get your money right, we've got someone who'll talk about that. We're going through all of the questions that we get in this area, and we're going to have a speaker who can speak to them, so that if this is something you've ever even considered, if it's like, back when I was 16, I thought it would be awesome to just pack a bag and travel the world. Like, if that is still on your heart somewhere, register for Exodus Summit. You can get on the wait list now at exodussummit.com. The days of the summit are September 21st through September 26th. And it's going to be an amazing time. Like I wish I had this when I left. I wish I had this as a resource. When I left, like I said, it was about a month between planning and leaving. And I did no Googling. I did no research. I was just like, fuck it, I'm out. And I was out. I was like,
hey, it bees like that sometimes.
Listen, my job had been stressful. I was not in the mood to do any thinking outside of that. I was just like, throw some things in the bag. I went up to Canada, spent some time with my best friend, went to LA. Somewhere along the trip, I was like, I should go say goodbye to my parents before I leave the country. Like, I was already traveling when I was like, oh, I should see them before I leave. Yeah, I think I was probably in Canada. I was like, I want to go to LA, see my dad, go to Florida, see my mom. And then I started in Mexico. And that's just like, I didn't know how to keep my budget down. I didn't know like the best planning resources. I know that stuff now. And so that's what I coach people on. But I'm one voice and I want people to hear more voices. And that's what Exodus Summit is about. Like, I can give you want a coaching session, you want to knock this out in a day, I've got you. I can help you with that. But not everybody, I recognize that like, I'm not for everybody. Like, and I'm okay with that. Everything is not for everybody.
No, that's
if you want to hear
what's so great about this is that it's voices and perspectives from all kinds of different walks of life, different ways of doing this. And it's sort of like one-stop shopping.
Right. Like, I am not a mom, so I cannot talk to you about tips for traveling with your kids. But I got someone who can do that. We have someone who's going to speak to LGBTQ issues while traveling. I don't feel comfortable doing that because I would have to research. I'd rather you speak to someone who has an experience themselves. So there are all these ways in which we're gathering the best women we can find, the best Black women we can find to get together virtually and answer your questions and be there for you and support you. You know, I hear a lot of Black people saying like, I want to get out of America. And if that's where you are, we want to be the resource for you. We want to help you because it is an obtainable dream. Adelia can tell you, like, leaving America behind is not only obtainable, it is good for your mental health. It is good for your physical health. It is often very good for your pockets. Like, honestly, besides leaving family behind, there's very little downside to it. So
yeah, that's pretty much my stance on things.
So if you've even considered it, like Exodus Summit is for you.
Do you have any advice for Black women?
Do you? Like, in the simplest terms, like, you're never going to make everyone happy. You should stop trying. Stop trying. Make yourself happy. And try to expand the list of things that will make you happy beyond the things that your culture has told you will make you happy. So look for ways you can be satisfied and pleased outside of what you have been told will bring you satisfaction. Because I find that the things that we've been told will bring you satisfaction are not.
They're not designed to serve us.
That's exactly it. That's exactly it. Those are not things that we like. My mom didn't tell me this is going to make me happy because her mom told her that, and her mom told her that. Somewhere in the middle, there was a white man. Somewhere in the middle of that, someone who does not look like you decided that this is what we're going to tell these people, and they're going to start to believe it. And they have worked to make you start to believe it. So look for happiness in ways that are authentic to your soul, not in ways that you've been told by society you should be finding it.
That's it right there. Okay. So if people want to connect with you follow your journey, attend Exodus Summit, how do they do
Okay.
that?
So my website is sheetasontheloose.com. You can find me there, or you can hit me up. My DMs are open on Instagram. I am at Shida D. That's SHIDAD. I can also be found on Facebook. The Facebook page is facebook.com/sheetasontheloose. And Exodus Summit is at www.exodussummit.com, September 21st through 26th. If you're hearing this after September 26th, you can still purchase an all-access pass and get all of the recordings that come from Exodus that were created in the Exodus Summit. So you can get all of the information at any time at exodussummit.com.
Okay. So, y'all, let me tell you that signing up for Exodus Summit is a must. It is being put on by Roshida and Stephanie Perry, who was a guest a couple of episodes ago. I really meant to get this episode out before the summit started, but that didn't happen. However, the Exodus Summit is still going on right now. You can get a free ticket right now, and you can catch session replays for free through September 30th. But if you upgrade to the Perks Pack, you can get replays for 2 years along with a bunch of coaching sessions, discounts, and all kind of goodies. Okay, so there's a link in the show notes along with links to Rashida's socials and her sabbatical course called From Burnout to Bliss. Thank you guys for your support of this podcast. It is greatly appreciated. Thank you for your reviews. Thank you for sharing. Thank you to those of you who became a patron. If you have any questions or comments, use the link in the description and leave me a message. Until next time.